I love when there are people who are working so hard to legitimize spirituality in the scientific space. And Dr. Tiffeny Todd is one of those incredible women. Dr. Todd earned a PhD in physics from University of California, Irvine, where she researched a quantum mechanism believed to give birds their ability to sense the Earth's magnetic field to navigate. And if you want to know why this is important, you want to think about the signs and synchronicities that you often receive that seem like, well, how did that cardinal just land right in front of me, or that butterfly, or that ladybug? What was it about that sign that seemed like it was sent from a loved one? And Dr. Todd explains exactly how these phenomena work, which was one of the questions that often I was sort of stumped by, is like, how does my loved one put these experiences right in front of me for me to see? So this was a fascinating podcast. I love everything that she talked about. I probably understood 60 to 70% of it. And I'm going to re-listen to this episode because there is so much goodness that she puts in this episode, and so many ways in which she makes physics make sense in the spiritual realm. It's just mind blowing. I was completely mind blown by this episode, by how she helps you to see what is basically this new field that she's sort of created, which is psychic physics. So check out today's episode with Dr. Tiffeny Todd. Listen to it more than once because I think you're going to need to, but it is, and don't listen to it on fast speed because you probably will need to like slow it down and go back and slow it down and go back. It is literally that good. Also, she has a new featured documentary out called Playing My Mind Symphony, which talks about her empirically supported mechanism by which the mind could be psychic and survive death. So you don't want to miss this episode if you want to understand more of the science behind the psychic phenomenon that we talk about on the show and that so many of you have experienced. With that, I bring you today's episode with Dr. Tiffeny Todd.
We need at our table of awareness the logician, but equally we need the intuitive, we need the mystic.
I almost died. I was allowed to go to the very precipice of death, of life and death, and look over the edge. And I was allowed to behold what was there and allowed to come back. Most people aren't.
When we talk about being aligned with ourself or being aligned with our soul or hearing our higher self, that's really what we're talking about, is being connected to that divine part of ourself, that light-filled part of us that is connected to God energy, that is connected to everybody here and every experience we've ever had.
If more doctors, more professionals can open up to use intuitive gifts in their work, that's really important.
Hi, I'm Dr. Amy Robbins, and welcome to Life, Death, and the Space Between. I'm a licensed clinical psychologist and medium, and here we explore life, death, mediumship, near-death experiences, consciousness, and what it all means. Welcome, Dr. Tiffeny Todd, to Life, Death, and the Space Between.
Thank you so much for having me. It's such a pleasure to be here with you.
I'm really excited to have this conversation because you are doing what I think is so critical in this field right now, which is legitimizing so much of these kind of non-local consciousness experiences in a scientific way. So first, can you tell us a little bit about your background? We were just talking earlier. We are like overlapping here because you were at Northwestern doing dance, but then moved into physics. And I want to hear a little bit about that and also about your sort of first non-local experience that really pushed you into looking deeper into this space.
Yeah, I knew I wanted to be a physicist when I discovered Einstein's theory in my middle school textbook, where it said if you ride your bike at the speed of light, your whole mass would turn into energy. That E equals MC squared, where energy is equivalent to matter. And I thought, wait, this can't be real. This is like science fiction magic, but that's real. So I was hooked on physics, but I also had a passion for dance. I was a dancer. And when I went to college, I got a dance scholarship with a company. And I was at a crossroads because I either had to be at company ballet class in the morning or at physics class. I couldn't do both. So I decided to dance while I was young and then sort of ponder the mysteries of the universe when I was older. And so that's sort of the path that I took. Yeah.
So what can you define what a physicist is? Let's start there, because I've never had someone define that. And as you were saying that, I was like, well, I feel like I have an understanding of it, but physics has also become a little bit of a divided camp, I think, where what we're talking about is concerned.
Yeah, physics is really, I would say, the most fundamental of sciences. It really is that equation, E equals mc squared. It's how matter interacts, right? I like to say that science is a predictive tool. It says that if our world looks this way, if I manipulate it like this, or if this changes, I can predict what will happen later, right? So all physics really is it's a set of mathematical tools that allows us to predict what is going to happen with matter in the future, all right? And also extrapolate where sort of the trajectory of matter was in the past. It really is a predictive tool, right? Sort of like a psychic, if you want to predict what's going to happen on a spiritual or energetic level with your soul path or something like that, you might have a psychic that can do a prediction and predict trajectories. Physics is a way of predicting the trajectories of matter, and it deals with matter and energy. Energy is what moves matter. Just to clarify, what do I mean by matter? If everyone harkens back to their maybe high school chemistry class, you probably recall that matter, everything, including us, all the objects in this room are made up of atoms. An atom has a nucleus, which has a positive charge, and an electron on the outside of the atom. Okay, you think of it as sort of orbiting the atom. So I think for the purposes of this discussion, it's really useful to think of matter as electrons. Just think of those as the particles that make up everything around us, right? And we know that electrons repel. If I had two electrons and I brought them together, they would repel. And what causes that repulsion? It's an exchange of energy in the form of light. And these electrons, they exchange these balls of light called photons. So really all that we interact with is matter and light, or in other words, electrons and balls of light called photons. Okay. And so that's our world. And that's what physics does, is it's really describing how these interactions work, which leaves a fundamental problem in physics of, well, how can anything else come in, such as free will? I think many people might be surprised to know that not only do most physicists not think that there's any sort of thing as a spirit or an afterlife, that the mind could possibly survive after death, but most physicists don't even think that there's such a thing as free will. Because if you think about it, if our brains are made up of these electrons, right, and light causing them to interact, meaning causing an electron or causing a neuron to fire or not. That's what we think of as thoughts. Where can free will come in? Where can spirit come in? Where can the idea or concept of a soul come in? And that's what the theory that I've developed is actually proposing. It's really just proposing that, hey, we have enough experimental evidence now to propose a mechanism by which free will could come in, by which psychic phenomena could come in to what we understand as mind in the brain.
Yeah. And tell us about, because you had an out-of-body experience, right?
Yeah, I did.
So tell us a little about that, and has that informed your work? Like, how has that informed your work, and how did that maybe push you more into this? I mean, it sounds like you were always curious about this, but maybe more pushed you into this direction.
Yeah, I was definitely always interested in sort of this idea of science and spirituality, or what could science say, or could science say anything about consciousness? Because many people think that science understands consciousness, but we don't. We don't actually know what consciousness is. When
it feels like it like slips between your fingers. Like, how do you even define it? It's so esoteric.
Right. That's still a very open question. What we see as consciousness right now is brain scans. We see neurons, which are brain cells. We see them firing, right? Everyone's heard the term neurons that fire together, wire together. What does firing mean? That just means a voltage change. So think of each neuron and cell as a battery, like your cell phone, you know, those bars when they're charged up versus charged down. When the neuron charges up, it fires. When it's charged down, it doesn't. And so what we see as thinking or thoughts, we see as voltage changes within neurons, within these cells.
Okay.
And we know that corresponds very well to what someone is thinking. We can now sort of map someone's brain and know that, oh, when these neurons light up in this pattern, they're thinking this, or they're reading that, or they're watching this movie. We've gotten very precise with being able to interpret how those voltage changes in a cell correlate and correspond to thoughts. So, but getting back to your question, yes, I'd always been interested in sort of where is consciousness emergent from, because we don't have a science of consciousness. We don't even know how anesthetics work, because we don't know what causes neurons to fire, to change their voltage in a way that corresponds to thoughts. That's an open mystery in science. I think I wouldn't have been able to propose or even conceive of the theory that I am putting forth had I not had the out-of-body experience. Because while most scientists think that mind emerges from these neurons firing, that somehow the fact that these neurons are firing somehow creates mind, creates our experience of consciousness, I'm proposing sort of the opposite. I'm proposing that those neurons firing are a reaction to mind, that mind exists somewhere else, and that the brain is a receiver, almost like an antenna, and that the mind is a signal that's being broadcast, that's animating these neurons in a way where what we're seeing is sort of like the shadow of what consciousness, of what our true self really is. And that's really what I experienced in my out-of-body experience. I'd say the best description is what Eckhart Tolle describes in his book, The Power of Now. Really in the first pages, he describes this sort of awakening experience. For me, I had sort of a mental shock that really quieted my mind, and I felt a connection to something greater than myself because of it. And the only thought that was left in my mind was this thought of surrender to whatever this is. I felt that I was being guided. I felt that I was being protected. And my only remaining thought was surrender to this. And I did my yoga. I lay in Shavasana, and a vortex of energy started to swirl around me, this tingling that Eckhart also describes when he talks about feeling the energetic body. That energetic body grew bigger and bigger and bigger. It became a vortex of energy around me until that was all that was. And it became very obvious to me that this vortex of energy was me. Like my mind, my consciousness, my state of awareness didn't change. It wasn't like, I don't know, I've never done any drugs, but it wasn't like my mindset sort of shifted into like a dream state or something like that. My mind was very clear, but it was just very clear that my mind was this energy. And I could feel it extending out into the infinite. And
was this just spontaneous that you had this experience?
It was spontaneous. Yeah. And I would say maybe sometime after I was able to access it less intensely, that vortex of energy. And I can still sort of feel it when I meditate, when I get very still, when I get very quiet. But I wouldn't say that I had sort of a dissolution of ego that was permanent. I didn't sort of fall into it and stay in this, I'm no Gandhi, I'm no Buddha, right?
Yeah, I think most people who have spiritual awakenings aren't. It's exactly what you're describing. Like you have this moment where you know That the reality in which you did live is no longer the reality in which you will be living and moving forward from that point forward.
Absolutely. It was a glimpse that what I am isn't the physical. And so that allowed me to even conceive of this idea of, I am actually this more energy. I am this energetic stream of information that is somehow being projected to or being focused to this body. A way that I can explain this for people who maybe haven't had a similar experience is there's an experiment called the fake rubber hand experiment or fake rubber arm experiment. I don't know if you've ever seen this, but you can Google some videos. There are plenty on YouTube. And basically what the experimenter does is you put your hands on a table, but one hand goes under the table, one arm. And then instead on the table, a fake arm is placed. And the experimenter with a brush strokes the fake arm as well as your arm under the table while you look at the fake arm. And you're getting sensory information of touch, and your mind is seeing that that touch is associated with the fake arm. And within just a matter of seconds, you start to have a sensation that the fake arm is your arm, right?
So your real arm is also being stroked?
Yes. So you are getting sensory stimulus to the brain that you are being stroked, that you are being touched with this brush. But your eyes are seeing that associated with the fake arm that you're focused on. And this illusion is so real that when the experimenter grabs a knife and like stabs the fake arm, the person will jump and have a visceral reaction of fear that their fake arm, which they now think of as themselves, is being attacked. And so I think this experiment shows that I think the mind is a focusing lens. It's a way of focusing us only on the sensory information that's coming in through this body. Now, medium psychics, they're able to break that illusion. They're able to stop focusing on their own rubber hand, their own body, and get information that's about other bodies, that's about other space, other time, right? But the way I think our brains, our bodies are designed is that they're a focusing mechanism so that the mind is only the mind which exists in, let's call it a spiritual realm, the other side, as many mediums say. We exist on the other side. And I can explain sort of scientifically what I think that is.
Yeah.
And we are focusing, though, only on sensory information coming in through this body. Though there are some people who are able to access information beyond what is being sensory filtered through this body. And I think that's what we call psychic information. So I think, again, just to answer your question, had I not had the visceral experience of not being the body, I don't think I maybe would have been able to conceive of this theory in the way that I did.
It's been a while since I've talked to you about what I'm up to. I want to first start by thanking so many of my supporters who have supported me on Patreon and in my Circle community. What's so exciting now is we have my new Circle community up and running, where if you want to contribute to supporting the podcast, you can do so at different levels for different values. So head on over to my Circle group. You can actually find the link in the show notes below. And there's opportunities to continue to support the podcast. And I have to say, your support of the podcast is frankly what has kept this podcast going over time. I have been funding the podcast solely by myself. I get a little bit of money in advertising dollars, but not a lot. So anything that you can give, if you have found value in this podcast, and it's not just giving without anything back, I will give back to you. You will be a part of this community with opportunities for discounts and conversations and Ask Amy Anythings. But it's a great opportunity for you to support what hopefully has helped you over the many, many years. Also, there's so many other ways now that you can work with me. I am offering a group course called Live Your Life Backwards, which is finishing its first cohort this winter and has been absolutely incredible. There's retreats coming up. There's workshops. There's one-on-one sessions with me. So many options that we can work together. So make sure you're subscribed to my YouTube channel. Make sure you're subscribed to my podcast, and make sure you're subscribed to my newsletter, where you will get a free soul wisdom workbook to help you dig deeper into the virtues that you want to be living in this lifetime. We all need so much more spirituality now. We are in a spiritual crisis, and I'm giving you so many tools to tap into your own spirituality. So check out, and don't forget to subscribe to Life, Death, and the Space Between so you never miss an episode. So can you tell us a little bit more about well, let's start with your definition of what is consciousness, and then maybe you can talk a little bit about the theory, and then I'm curious. I have so many questions, and then we'll go from there before I fire more questions at you.
Sounds good. Well, let me just explain what my mechanism is, how I think consciousness works. And it really rests on sort of, and it's not, I hesitate to call it a theory. I call it a mechanism because it doesn't rely on new science. I'm not sort of inventing new ideas that hasn't been shown experimentally to have any sort of basis. So in order to understand sort of what consciousness is, or more importantly, where consciousness is, we have to understand that if all of the electrons, all of the matter in the universe were to disappear, space wouldn't be empty. It would be bursting with energy. Every minute, there are these bursts of energy popping in and out of existence. These are called virtual photons. Just think of them as, again, photons are balls of light, these bursts of light coming in and out of existence. And so we know that the vacuum, there's a new field of research that's exploring this quantum vacuum and discovering that the quantum vacuum is a field of entangled information. Okay. That's where I think mind exists. I think mind is an information stream in this entangled quantum vacuum. That information of mind is sort of communicated to physical matter via these bursts of light popping in and out of the vacuum. And what is it communicated to? It's communicated to quantum antennae in our cells. And these quantum antennae cause the neuron to either fire or not fire. So the thinking, the cognition is happening in the quantum vacuum, and it's being communicated to these cells, these quantum antennae in our cells, via these bursts of light via the quantum vacuum, these bursts of light. So that's the mechanism.
Okay. So there's the notion that there is I guess, let me see if I can translate and if I understood this. So there is a field of information that is out there and accessible to anybody.
It's accessible if you have a quantum antenna.
That's where I was going.
This is a relatively new field of physics called relativistic quantum information.
Oh my God.
And it's a mouthful. And I'm sorry to say there really isn't a lot of information on it out there yet for lay people because it's only been around for a couple of decades. But the best way I can explain it is there was a book called Entangled Minds, written by Dean Reagdin of the Noetic Science Institute. And why that was the perfect title, because what he was proposing is that there's this one phenomenon in physics that resembles psychic phenomenon. What is a psychic doing? A psychic who maybe I've never met is able to sort of tap into my mind and sort of share things about what I'm thinking or what I'm going through or what I'm seeing, even though I've never met this psychic. Right? It's almost as if our minds are somehow entangled. And think of entanglement as the only phenomena in physics that resembles psychic phenomenon. It's where you're able to transmit information from one location to another instantaneously, or from one time to another.
So some people would call that telepathy.
Yes. Yes, telepathy, but also psychokinesis, being able to sort of affect or get information about a system, remote viewing, any range of sort of psychic phenomenon, or even mediumship, where a medium is able to get information on a mind that is discarnate and not associated or projecting to a body. So all range of psychic phenomenon you can think of as accessing information that's not coming from our five senses. It's accessing information in a yet unknown way. And the only phenomenon in physics that we know of that resembles that is this idea of entanglement. The problem with this idea of entangled minds has always been that in physics, two particles can become entangled. Say I have two particles that are created together, and that's the key. In order to create two particles that are entangled, they have to be created together. Then when they are separated, if you alter one, the other one sort of changes in a way that's correlated, almost as if they're psychic. Like you change one and the other reacts. Okay? No matter how far apart they are in the universe. That's what makes those entangled particles seem psychic. Okay? Now, the problem is, how can two minds that have never met be psychic? Because again, in physics, up until this new field, we thought that entanglement only occurred when particles were created together.
Got it.
And the breakthrough has recently come that now we know that we can take two particles that have never come in contact and are so far apart they will never come in contact. They can't affect one another through light signals, normal means of communication, right? I'm communicating with you right now through a light signal, right? Through an internet, radio, television signals. Those are light signals, and they travel at the speed of light. It takes 8 minutes for the sunlight to get to us, right? It's not instantaneous. So the information I'm talking about is an instantaneous information sharing. That's what entanglement is. That's what this psychic phenomenon is purported to be. And so what relativistic quantum information has discovered through experimentation is that you can have two objects that are separated in a way that they can't communicate with one another through light signals because they're too far apart. But nevertheless, they can become entangled if they have a quantum antenna to access entanglement from the vacuum. It's called entanglement harvesting, where the vacuum, you have to understand, extends through all space. And so if you can access with a quantum antenna the quantum vacuum, you can become entangled with anything else.
Got it. Okay.
Right?
So how do you get a quantum antenna? Where do you sell quantum antennas these days?
Well, when I did my PhD in physics at the University of California, Irvine, I was in a group of quantum biologists, and we were studying a quantum antenna. It just so happened to work out this way. Talk about synchronicity. I think had I not specialized in this research area, I would not have been able to come up with this mechanism or the idea for this mechanism. So this quantum antenna, it's created through metabolism, which is something only living things do, right? It's created through oxygenation, through breathing, right? Metabolism. If I have two atoms, right, and one atom donates an electron to the other, they have an imbalance of electrons, right? One has an electron more than it should, and one has less. This creates something called an electron spin. Just think of it as like a pole. It's like imbalanced. But when two electrons sort of share an exchange in this way, they become entangled.
I love when that happens.
My Mac always does that. They become entangled. And so one atom has a spin up electron, the other has a spin down electron.
We're getting that. For those who aren't watching, we're getting these thumbs up and thumbs down things on the screen.
I know, on my screen. And so this information can be reduced to something binary. It's either yes, no, good, bad, light, dark, up, down, right? I think in Zen philosophy, there's this white room scenario where if you were in a completely white room, you would lose all judgment, all objectivity. You would sort of be in this more spiritual state of unity, whereas our physical state of mentation and information and the ego is one of differentiation and judgment, right? And so all information, all mind is opposition.
Okay.
Or opposites. Any information stream, as you may know from computer science, can be deduced into zeros and ones, right? Zeros, ones, right? And so
I'll trust you on that one. That's outside my wheelhouse of knowledge.
I think if we take it from, just the idea of if you had pure randomness, there would be no information in that, right? But let's say you had particles that were floating around in a room all randomly, but then all of a sudden the particles coalesce in one area. That suddenly is information. It's like, ooh, something's happening. There's something is different, right? So there's randomness versus information, right?
Okay.
And so anyway, what is the quantum antenna? It's basically these electron spins that are entangled. And when they're entangled, this state is very sensitive. It's very sensitive to those virtual photons popping in and out of existence from the vacuum. And so this sensitive antenna is what would be able to be sensitive to the signal of mind. It's the mechanism by which this mind can connect to the physical body and result in the neurons firing or not firing. I always like to say if this quantum antenna, it's sort of like a binary antenna. It can either be parallel or anti-parallel, right? The two spins. Okay. Think of it as neuron firing, neuron not firing. That's the simplest way, right, I can explain. So it's sort of like what we see as thinking is really just the tip of the iceberg of the cognition that's happening in the quantum vacuum. Yeah.
So is there a way to increase the probability that our antenna can tap into this quantum fields? What did you call it? Is it the vacuum?
Yeah, the quantum vacuum.
Yeah.
Well, I think it's interesting to say that a couple of things. Two pieces of experimental evidence. Why do I think that this antenna could be related to consciousness? There's some modeling that suggests that anesthetics disable these quantum antenna. And that's how anesthetics work. And anesthetics are very specific in blocking out the consciousness of sort of executive function. They don't necessarily block out sort of the autonomic nervous system, the sort of automatic functions of breathing and sort of stimulus response things, but they really do hone in on our executive function thinking. That's what anesthetics block. And there's some modeling to suggest that it's by deactivating these quantum antenna that they do that. And just to be technical, the quantum antenna is technically called a radical pair. And it's believed to allow birds to give their ability to sense the Earth's magnetic field. That was actually what I was studying, is how these radical pairs could allow birds to sense the Earth's magnetic field. Which is interesting that mediums say often our loved ones on the other side will try to communicate through us with animals that sense magnetic fields. It's as if the spirit's mind is again able to manipulate those quantum antenna that allows the animal to sense the magnetic field and thus alter their trajectory.
There's a huge explanation that people always say, how is it possible that I always see this animal when blah, blah, blah. It's interesting you say that too, because the other night my dog he's been sitting in like weird spots. And the other day he was just sitting at the bottom of our stairs looking up at something and started barking. And I'm like, I wonder what it is that he's sensing now or seeing that I can't see. And frankly, didn't have time to sit and tune into to get my quantum antenna up to try to figure out what it was.
Right, exactly.
Okay, so
and the second thing you asked is how could someone improve that? I want to point out, oh gosh, I'm losing the name and I see the book in my over there, but I can't reach it. I think his name is Dr. Tarrant.
Oh, Jeff.
Jeff
I
Tarrant.
love Jeff. Yeah,
Yes.
I've had him on twice.
Yes, his book, Becoming Psychic, he's done a lot of research, and I've even met channelers who became channelers, meaning they were able to channel other minds after intensive breath work. Well, what does intensive breath work do? I said that these quantum antennae are created through the process of breathing, through the process of metabolism. So I would imagine perhaps, and this is just a hypothesis, that intensifying this breath work, expanding this breath work, expands the activation of more of those quantum antenna. So it might seem, it might make sense that you would then pick up more information from the quantum vacuum, other than the signal that is your own mind.
Yeah. When I've done breath work, cause I do, that's sort of my new, treatment modality that I love. It gets me to exactly what you were talking about earlier when you had the out of body experience. I've had such expanded states of energy that it's taken me like an extra 15 to 20 minutes to get that energy to come back into my physical body. I describe feeling like Stay Puft Marshmallow Man, like my energy field is so big and so expanded that it feels just like holy shit, like what is happening? But also in those moments, I definitely feel like I have very clear information that comes in either through my own guides, or I've had like experiences. I was in a sound healing and breath work with my sister-in-law, and her grandmother came through pretty strongly to me. So it's like those experiences that I think to your point in some way shift you out of that, like doing that executive functioning consciousness to a more, I would say a more receptive state.
Right. No, absolutely. I agree wholeheartedly. And I think these sort of two sort of pieces of sort of information, or I guess evidence, I would say, sort of supports this mechanism. I think what's unique about this mechanism is that is supported, there's sort of 4 pillars, and there are experiments to sort of support all 4 pillars. I would summarize by saying, mediums often say that our loved ones who have passed, they're with us, that they're here with us now because we're actually where they are. We are actually on the other side, but we are, because you have to understand this idea of the quantum vacuum, it's not somewhere else, it's superimposed all around us, the quantum vacuum. Think of it as like a dimension superimposed with our dimension. And that really is how mediums tend to describe where spirit is, sort of like our higher self or our spirit is in that space. It's on that other side, but it's having a connection with this physical realm, with physicality.
Yeah, it's almost like...
And it's through... Oh, sorry. I was
no,
just
go
say
ahead. Go ahead.
It's through the veil. So the mind is on the other side, whether it is alive or dead. And the veil, mediums say that they connect with those minds by meeting them at the veil. And I'm proposing that this veil are these virtual photons popping in and out of existence, that's the communication medium between the information on the other side and the quantum antenna of electrons, which is, again, physical matter. That's these photons, these bursts of light are the connection between the mind on the other side and the electrons, which is physical matter. So we have a connection of light. Light is connecting the mind, the spirit, to the physical body. That's the general idea.
How are you studying this? How do you research this?
That is a tricky aspect because it does span sort of the 3 main pillars of physical science. So one pillar that we haven't talked about is from biology, a recent discovery of a researcher named Michael Levin. he has a lot of fascinating work, which really helps us understand that a thought or a memory, as we see it in the physical body, is a voltage change within cells, right? This is really fascinating. And I'll go into that more, but just let me finish this thought. Then there's the radical pair mechanism of these quantum antennae. That's really in the realm of chemistry, and right? And then relativistic quantum information, when we're talking about the vacuum, that's an area of physics. So usually when you do a PhD, you specialize in one thing and you really don't have a lot of knowledge in these other areas. And so I think maybe that's why it might be hard. I think we're having a hard time, or we've had a hard time up to this point, understanding consciousness, is because everyone is thinking of it in very siloed, and especially physicists aren't thinking about it at all. They think, it's just a psychology question. Because at the fundamental level of physics, we know how photons and electrons interact, and there's no deviation. So there's no free will coming in, because we have equations that can predict how they're going to interact. So, whatever your mind is, it's just boils down to these physical laws, and we can calculate those. So there's no free will.
So that's where sort of traditional physicists would debunk quantum physicists. So that's where the rub is between the two.
Well, they wouldn't debunk quantum physicists. What they're debunking is non-physicists taking quantum physics, and in fact, a misinterpretation of the Copenhagen formalism of quantum physics, and they're using that to explain psychic phenomena or spirituality. And that's where some physicists are taking issue. This idea that an electron is in a superposition, and then when it it's the consciousness that collapses it, and we create our reality.
Is that the particle into the wave situation?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
Okay. I get that much of it, that a particle collapses into a wave. That's about.
And that's actually not what the physics says. It doesn't say that that's physically what's happening. We just have a mathematical equation where we model a prediction of an experiment with the math showing that. That doesn't mean the electron actually is a wave and then becomes a particle. That's just how we mathematically model something. Now, a lot of people in the New Age community have taken that to mean, that's what is actually physically happening. So we may not have time to get into it now, but there's another interpretation of quantum mechanics, which my mechanism, I think, is more aligned with, which is called the pilot wave interpretation, or Bohmian mechanics. And there, an electron is always electron. It doesn't become a wave and a particle. But the electron is guided by a wave. And that's why sometimes it looks like the electron's path is following this unpredictable pattern that can be modeled with a wave equation. That doesn't mean the electron is a wave, but it's guided by a wave. Now, what could this guiding wave be? This guiding wave would be entangled and extend throughout the entire universe. Well, there's some papers suggesting that those virtual photons popping in and out of existence, this sort of bubbling sea of energy, that's the pilot wave, right? And we know that photons are the force carriers of electrons. What separates two electrons? It's an exchange of photons. So it's conceivable that the sea of virtual photons, this bubbling sea, is the pilot wave that is guiding all matter in the universe. And those virtual photons are being emitted from a field that is entangled. Right?
Oh my God. I feel like I'm going to need to listen to this episode 4 times to process all of this. It's so...
Well, the last thing I want to say is I want to really highlight the work of Morris Friedman, who has recently, I think, provided, I think, the pivotal experiment that I think sort of supports my idea. I'm saying that what thought does is it controls these virtual photons in order...
The photons in the quantum space.
Yeah, the photons popping in and out of existence of the quantum vacuum.
Okay.
What I'm saying is that mind controls these virtual photon fluctuations.
Which makes sense in terms of how one would manifest, right? That the nature of what you think creates the reality that is before you.
Yes, to a degree, right? I'm saying that it perturbs reality. Not that you think something and then it automatically moves all the electrons in the universe to bring that together like that, right? But there's a slight perturbative power. So when you're dealing with a very sensitive quantum antenna, when you're dealing with these electron spins, they're very sensitive when they're in that state, those electron spins, when they're entangled as a radical pair. So they're very sensitive to sort of quantum vacuum photon fluctuations that aren't noise, that aren't random. It's sort of like a coin toss, right? Mm-hmm. The antenna, think of it as a coin toss. If it's always doing heads, tails, heads, tails, heads, tails, it's just, going between those parallel, anti-parallel states. There's no information in that. But suddenly, if the mind starts pushing that antenna to be more heads, so the neuron fires, now you have information. So normally, if we just looked at physics says that these virtual photons, they pop in and out of existence randomly. Mm-hmm. It's just random.
Okay. And those virtual photons are what carries the information.
It's transmitting, yes, the information, okay. Yes. It depends. If the virtual photons are just firing randomly, then there's no information.
Right.
So let me
highlight. They start to group together.
It's when they start to choose a direction. I would definitely
have needed a private tutor for physics. Like this is like, I need like 4 more interviews with you. Okay.
Well, let me just then highlight Dr. Friedman's work. This is a psychokinesis experiment. These experiments had been done for years by PEAR, P-E-A-R, the Princeton Engineering Anomalies Research Lab. For decades, they'd done experiments with random number generators where they tried to have people with their mind influence the outcome of a quantum coin flip, you could say. Let's imagine you have a coin flip based on a quantum process. What is underneath that quantum process is these virtual photons. Okay. Just imagine that a coin is being flipped by these virtual photons popping in and out of existence, that bubbling is causing the coin to flip heads, tails, head, tails, heads, tails. And because the virtual photons are flipping randomly, the coin is flipping randomly, 50% heads, 50% tails. If you do 100 trials, you're going to get about 50-50, right? What they did at PEAR is they had participants try to, with their mind, will, intention, manifest that the outcome of the coin flip would be more heads or more tails. Right? And they were able to get a slight change that was statistically significant. Now, these results were ignored by the scientific community, I think because of 3 reasons. 1, maybe other labs had difficulty reproducing the results. 2, the magnitude was very small. And 3, there was no physical explanation for how such a thing could be possible. There's no theory to explain how such a thing could be possible. So it's easy to dismiss. So Dr. Morris Friedman recently repeated the experiment 4 times successfully with a much bigger magnitude of effect size. So that takes care of 2 of the critiques of whether psychokinesis is real. And the way he did it is very clever. He realized that there's a region of the brain that seems to filter psychic information. It's a region of the brain that tends to, again, focus our mind only on information coming through our body, our physical brain, the stimulus to our physical.
Is that the God spot that it's called? The God spot?
I think it's a different region.
Okay.
But like there's one region on the right that you're needed to focus. There's a region sort of on the left.
Because when I get information, I feel like it comes through my right, like right back here.
And that could be true. What he's talking about is another region of the brain on the left that blocks that.
Interesting.
That
Okay.
causes you to not go to that region and not focus on the information coming into maybe that God spot region.
Which makes sense,
So
right?
this is a
Because the
block.
left side of our brain is much more logical.
Exactly.
Okay.
Exactly. You'll see, I don't know if this is true, but you'll see people like keep their right hand occupied, like almost Tyler Henry, keeping the right hand occupied so that left brain can be quiet He blocked a region of that left brain that was identified as possibly blocking psychic information. And that's how he saw, I believe, a fourfold increase in the significance, in the effect of this psychokinesis of influencing the coin flip. Don't quote me if it's 4 times, but I do know it was a dramatic increase. And he reproduced this experiment multiple times.
How did he block it? Do we know how he blocked it?
Yes, it's with TMS, a type of TMS.
Oh,
yeah. So, temporarily.
For people who don't know what TMS is, it's transmagnetic stimulation. Is it?
Yeah, it's using some magnetic stimulation to sort of create some temporary lesions in the brain that just blocks the activity of a specific region. And they're temporary. But he was able to, by disabling the filter, he was able to allow the mind to focus on another system and influence this random number generator. So if you look at what this is essentially saying, it's saying that mind, wherever mind is, that thoughts are able to change the outcome of a random number generator. Well, what's causing the random number generator to be random? It's those virtual photon fluctuations, right?
Let me ask
So what we're saying, we're saying is that mind is altering the behavior of those virtual photons, which is the premise that I'm proposing of how mind communicates with neurons, right? Is through these virtual photons. How mind interfaces with the physical is by altering the behavior of these virtual photons. And so I highlight this experiment as sort of a first sort of clue or piece of evidence to support this idea that I'm proposing, that mind is in the quantum vacuum and it's communicated via these virtual photon fluctuations.
This is amazing. That all made sense to me. So when you think about I'm sure you've heard about the telepathy tapes, Jeff. It's all the rage.
Yes.
If this could be like proven again, one of the things that could be looked at is if the minds of these non-speaking autistics, if that part of the brain in the left side is quieter, and that allows that right side to connect to that quantum vacuum that you're talking about. Is that a right interpretation of everything you've just said?
Yeah, and any psychics, there might be some. It would be really good to look at the architecture and of that, of these brain circuitries, these different regions of the brain, because different areas of the brain are responsible for different things. And I do think that, again, the brain is a focusing mechanism. When it's working sort of exactly right, or neurotypically, I would say, we're not getting psychic information, right? We're only focused on the information coming in through our senses. And then when it's exceptional that people then open up to getting more information. And so I think his concept of the brain, there's a region of the brain that's blocking our psychic access, right? And weakening that, I think, was really sort of a key breakthrough in this field.
Yeah, it's fascinating to think about like how perhaps this has evolved over time and how we've become less, I would say, intuitive, right? Like the ability to tap into kind of this quantum space over time, how much that, if you like tracked a human brain over however many years to see how much that has gotten shut down or that muscle has not been used. And so all these other muscles kind of come in and take over. And we say neurotypical as if the way that the brain is behaving in that time is the right way and the other ways are wrong versus just different, and how much value there is. Like I think you talked about in your documentary, why we're not in medicine, perhaps pairing people who have this natural ability to tap into this space and working side by side, perhaps with surgeons, physicians, to see energetically what might be going on, what they could tap into to help. I mean, it seems revolutionary to me.
Yeah. No, absolutely. I definitely work with channelers and mediums to try to glean pointers of where to go with scientifically. I think that sort of collaboration, I think, could really, really be helpful and could really, really be fruitful. Definitely.
So what is psychic physics? I love your little shirt. Thoughts create things. So what creates thoughts?
Thanks. Psychophysics.com. That's my website. Anyone can go there, and there's a button that says view film. You can view a documentary that I made on this theory, this mechanism of consciousness. The documentary is called Playing My Mind Symphony. It got licensed by Amazon, but Prime Video, but it's not, I don't know when it's going to come out on Amazon Prime, but it should be soon, but it is streaming now. So if you always just go to my website, you'll be able to find wherever it's streaming. And you'll also have links to my talk. I gave a presentation on this theory. I sort of unveiled it at the 2024 Science of Consciousness Conference hosted by the University of Arizona.
No.
It's in Arizona.
Okay. Is that with Gary Schwartz?
No. This is one with, it's led by Stuart Hammerhoff. He has another, probably the only other quantum theory of consciousness that he created with Nobel Prize winner in physics, Sir Roger Penrose, the sort of famous mathematical physicist. So I spoke at the conference there. If anyone is interested in their theory of consciousness, I will point out how it differs from mine. Mine sort of presumes that consciousness and thinking happens in the quantum vacuum and is communicated to the brain, so that the activity we see in our brain is really a subset of information. It's less information than what's actually happening with the mind on a broader scale. Sort of like this idea of, I'm having this physical mental experience, but my higher self, my spiritual self, is maybe having more thoughts and more awareness of maybe my past lives, future trajectories, that intuition, that there's more to me, there's more thinking going on than I may have access to at any one point in time in this physical brain. Whereas the Hammerhoff-Penrose model suggests that when there's a collapse of a wave function in the brain, and that creates a burst of sort of proto-consciousness, but that the thinking is sort of still physical mechanisms in the brain that are doing some sort of calculation, sort of like more of a circuitry type model. And the issue I have with that is when mediums talk to spirits, the spirits are still thinking, they're still perceiving, they're still thinking, and they're able to comment on things that have happened after they've passed away.
Right.
So cognition, the act of thinking and perceiving and having an opinion about what you're perceiving, seems to continue even when the physical body is gone. So whatever mechanism of mind that we propose, I think has to be able to explain that. And I think the only mechanism that can explain that is one where mind isn't a result of totally 100% a result of physical processes happening in a physical brain. And therefore, when the physical brain goes, all of that thinking stops. I think that that's sort of where my model maybe differs from their model.
Well, and that would be one explanation of consciousness existing outside the brain, right? Yeah. And I think the reason they say it's a proto-consciousness, because there's this idea of, well, why then wouldn't my liver be conscious, right? Like there are the same sort of cells all over the body. And I think that's where Michael Levin's work really is interesting, and it comes in, is because he found that, when an embryo is developing, all the cells are identical.
But some cells have to become an eye, some cells have to become a nose, some cells have to become a stomach, right? And each cell has the same DNA. So that information isn't in the DNA to tell the cell what organ to become. What happens is the cells start to change their voltage. So an eye cell will take on 5 volts and a stomach cell will take on 10 volts. And that voltage then turns on different genes. So in the stomach, you're going to turn on the gene that creates acid to dissolve food, but you don't want that gene on in your eye, right?
No.
So it's the combination of genes that get turned on that determine what a cell is going to be, what organ it's going to be. But all cells have the same gene. So what tells the cell what voltage to become? That's an open mystery. But what Michael Levin discovered is that the cells are following this voltage map. So much so that if you artificially change, say a thumb cell is 1 volt and a pinky cell is 3 volts. If you change the pinky cell to 1 volt, you'll grow another thumb here. Like if you artificially change the voltage in the cell, it will become the organ that corresponds to that voltage. And it's a memory that lasts generation upon generation. Well, where is that memory stored? Where do the cells, no one cell knows what a body looks like. So how does each cell get that voltage information? Well, I think I'm saying that in the quantum vacuum, the memory, the anatomical memory of that organism is there. And it's just imprinting on the physical. The physical is just following, again, the imprint of the information in the vacuum that's communicated to all of these cells via these photons that are signaling to these radical pairs, these quantum antenna in the cells. And the quantum antenna in the cell can then change the gates that control the ion flows that either increase the voltage of the cell or decrease the voltage of the cell. So I'm proposing a mechanism to explain where this voltage map information comes from that Michael Levin has identified as the basis of memory and thought.
Dr. Tiffeny Todd, you are doing incredible work. Thank you for this physics class today. I loved it. I felt like I was front and center in a lecture, and it was like amazing and mind-blowing. And you do such a great job of just like explaining it all and breaking it down. I am just blown away by all of this. And thank you for the work you're doing, legitimizing these experiences for people and just bringing it into the scientific space. I think it is crucial right now. And I am certainly, as someone who's also trying in my area of work to legitimize it, I'm just grateful for those who are kind of working in parallel in other fields. So thank you so much for your time today.
Oh, thank you for the opportunity. It was great talking with you. Thank you.
You too. Thank you. Like what you heard today and want to hear more? Wondering what comes next and what it all means? Head over to Apple Podcast, Spotify, Stitcher, Google Play, or anywhere you get your podcasts and hit subscribe. Also, if you could take a minute to rate and review my podcast, I would really appreciate it. Stay tuned as we continue to explore life, death, and the space between.